What it do? Yo man, listen. Today, I'm doing a different video. I'm going to be talking about Commander from Magic the Gathering. More specifically, I'm going to be talking about Tayam, the Luminous Enigma. Let's get right into it. He's my favorite commander in the game. He's one of the few decks that I actually have built on paper, and I really enjoy playing with him. Now, let's just discuss what his base stats are. So he's a 4-cost, 1 generic, 1 white, 1 black, 1 green. So good colors there. He has 3/3, and his text reads: each other creature you control enters the battlefield with an additional vigilance counter on it. So something, you play a creature, it has a vigilance counter. Pretty cool. 3 mana, comma, remove 3 counters from among creatures you control. So, he feeds into himself. Put the top 3 cards of your library into your graveyard. Then return a permanent card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So it is a reanimator commander, but it focuses on 3 cost or less creatures and permanents. Now, as I said, he's my favorite commander. Mostly because of the sheer amount of nonsense you can pull with him. There are many different ways to build them, so I'm not going to be able to cover all the combos. I just want to go over some of the combos I like personally. So the first basic combo is with Devoted Druid. Devoted Druid is a 1-cost generic, 1-cost green elf with 0/2. She is a mana dork in the sense that she taps for mana. However, she has an ability where you put a -1/-1 counter on her, and this untaps her. Unfortunately, despite the fact that you can, pile up mana and use it at the same time, Tayam doesn't let you pay the 3 counter cost one at a time. So you can't just say, oh, I tap Druid, I get a counter, Tayam removes the counter, that's 1/3 complete. That doesn't work. You need all 3 counters to be paid at the same time. The reason this creature is good is because there are certain cards which increase her health. Because her stats right now are 0/2, so if you get 2 -1/-1 counters, she dies. However, if you were to have certain cards to increase her health to 4, or toughness. I'm sorry, Magic people. I'm sorry. I'm still trying. I'm a newer player. But anyways, if you were to get to a situation where toughness was 4, then you will be able to use her ability 3 times, get 3 mana, get 3 counters, use Tayam, mill your entire deck. So this essentially lets you go infinite with a little bit of support. Speaking of support, Centaur Garden is a very good land that allows you to do this. It adds for green, whatever. The ability we care about is the threshold. For 1 green and tapping, you sacrifice this land, target creature gets +3/+3 until the end of the turn. Now, the reason this is good is because the +3/+3 isn't a counter, so it actually stays on the monster. This is not a situation where, oh, you get a +1/+1 counter and -1/-1 counter and they just, cancel each other out. No, this is a situation where you put the +3/+3 on her, tap her 3 times, untap her 3 times, she gets -3/-3, but when the counters are gone, she still retains the +3/+3. So you can mill your entire deck. There's another card I really like. It's significantly more jankier. It's Shieldmate. Now, Shieldmate, you sacrifice it, target creature gets +0/+4 until the end of the turn. The reason I personally like Shieldmate more is because he's a, he just sacrifices himself, right? There is no associated cost, similar in the case of the land where you would have to pay the green mana. Now, you might be saying, hey Draupnir, what's the goal, right? I mill my entire deck, do I just lose the game? Not really. So, I want to cover some other combos as well before I go to payoffs. So, Ashnod's Altar is a must-have card because you sacrifice a creature, you add 2 generic mana. And if you have something such as a Promise of Moonray, which is a 3-cost enchantment, it reads, when a creature you control dies, sacrifice Promise of Moonray. If you do, create 4 1/1 colorless spirit tokens. These two go infinite. So the way it works is you, of course, need an initial creature to die through Ashnod's Altar. Then you sacrifice a promise of Bunrei. You get 4 colorless spirit creatures. Now, those 4 creatures enter with, what's it called? 1 vigilance counter each. So right now you have 4 vigilance counters on the board. You can remove 3 vigilance counters, kill 2 of the spirit tokens, and then that's a Tayam activation. You bring back Promise of Bunrei, repeat that process until you've milled your entire library. Other cards with sack outlets, this isn't exactly like milling your entire library, but this is similar to combos where, like goblin combos and whatnot, where you sacrifice a goblin, comes back, you give it a +1/+1 counter to counteract the putrid goblins and whatnot. So undying and persist creatures who, when they die, they come back with a certain amount of counters on them. Tayam can remove these counters, so through using cards such as Ashnod's Altar, you can get, a relatively high amount of advantage from them. Now, sack outlets, sacrifice outlets, right? I'm just saying sack outlets. Because it saves so much time, guys. It's going to save hours upon hours. Now, I would like to think there are 3 different, there are absolutely different types, more than 3, but the 3 ones I run in my deck are the creature sacrificers, essentially Carrion Feeder and Presidio, in the sense that they sacrifice another creature and put a +1/+1 counter on themselves. Now, the +1/+1 counter on themselves is pretty cute for general play. However, them getting counters doesn't really contribute to you doing degenerate stuff because they exist exclusively to kill the monsters you have. The second type of outlets, Ashnod's Altar, it's relatively cheaper compared to the Pyraxian Altar because Pyraxian Altar is like $30 Canadian, which is crazy. That's just a piece of cardboard, by the way. You sacrifice a creature, add 1 mana of any color, right? You're sacrificing the creatures, you add mana, that's pretty cool. Lastly is the Altar of Dementia. Now this, I wasn't playing it, but the fact that there are people in the pods I play, they're like, oh, even if my health hits 0, I don't lose the game. They have those enchantment cards and whatnot. It is a useful tool to have an alternative win condition in the form of milling your opponent's entire deck. Because remember, when you have infinite mana with Tayam and infinite tokens, you're going to have infinite resurrections, and you're going to be able to just sacrifice the things you bring back over and over again and just mill your opponent's entire deck. Altar of Dementia is the target player puts a number of cards, sacrifice a creature, target player puts a number of cards equal to the sacrificed creature's power from the top of the library into their graveyard. So depending on what creature you're sacrificing, it might be 3 cards or 1 card, and it might take quite a while to mill all 3 opponents. Now, the main payoff, there are multiple payoffs, however, the one I love most is Walking Ballista. So the point is, when you're milling your entire deck, you will be able to reach whatever monster you want. And the fact that Ballista is, XX cost, which means, Tayam can just bring it back no problem, and you can just put it 1/1. And he works off counters himself, is pretty cool. If you have any of the combos where you get infinite mana and infinite counters, the way it will go is you mill your entire deck, bring back Walking Ballista, keep doing your combo, right? Because remember, when you have 0 cards in deck, milling doesn't make you lose the game. If you draw a card, then you lose the game on your upkeep. So what you do is you just, after you mill your deck, you bring back Walking Ballista, you keep doing the process over and over again to get infinite amount of mana, and you put infinite +1/+1 counters on Walking Ballista through the second bolt point, and then you just use a third bullet point to just bolt people down on your table and they hate you. Now, a combo I really like, this is another type of infinite combo, however, I think it's a little cuter. So it uses two of the cards I already mentioned in the form of Walking Ballista and Persidio. Now, Persidio doesn't have to be the creature you use here. It can be any sack outlet. It can be a creature, it can be a mill thing, whatever. Mill probably wouldn't work, it's fine. So the card we want to focus on is Micaeus the Unhallowed. So he's a 6 cost, really expensive, 5/5 creature. Whenever a human deals damage to you, destroy it, intimidate. So these are all cool, but the ability we care about is the third bullet point. Other non-human creatures, so Walking Ballista is not a human, get +1/+1 and have undying. So undying is when a creature with undying dies, if it had no +1/+1 counters on it, return to the battlefield under its owner's control with a +1/+1 counter on it. Since Walking Ballista can just remove +1/+1 counters like it's nothing, the way you do it, Walking Ballista shoots something, Persidio sacks Ballista, Ballista comes back, because remember, it has Undying, but it doesn't have any +1/+1 counters. Come back to the board with a +1/+1 counter. You repeat this process like 120 times, you win the game. Now, other than the Ballista, there are some other cards, such as Blood Artists. The reason I put it there is I have her, right? I don't have the other ones. But these type of cards where when this creature or another creature dies, target player loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. This, with any amount of persist undying creatures, it can be a win con. You can maybe pick people off. Sometimes your main combo gets disrupted, maybe something gets exiled and whatnot. Despite Ballista being a very good option for the deck, it's not the only option, and that's why I really like it. Now, remember, just because you can go infinite doesn't mean you can't go infinite-er. YouTube captions, please don't say something wrong, I beg of you. Now, this isn't a card you will often see, but I add him because I think it's very neat. So Samwise Gamgee. The color fits is a 2 cost 2/2. Whenever another non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, create a food token. Food tokens are cool. Sacrifice 3 food tokens, return target historic card from your graveyard to your hand. Artifacts, legendaries, and sagas are historic. You're not going to be able to make it work with something like Promise of Boonray, but the fact that Promise of Boonray is eventually gonna, you're gonna get to a point where every couple of Promise of Boonray reprocs, you're gonna be able to say, hey, let me just not do Promise of Boonray, let me just do a creature. And then Samwise works, relatively well. You can get back legendaries, that's a way you will get back Micaeus, right? Because he's not a 3 cost, he's a 6 cost. I like it, if you like certain artifacts, maybe higher cost artifacts, or sagas, I don't know, whatever you want. I like the fact that he can bring back stuff, and I do appreciate the edge corner cases where the food tokens matter. Now, decking out is a very real problem. When your whole entire strategy revolves around you milling your entire deck and using your graveyard as a resource, it's a problem. But luckily, there are solutions. Firstly, I tried using Gaia's Blessing and similar cards where if they're milled, they return your entire graveyard to your library. That's cool and all. However, it often, really hurts my plays. That's why I decided to go with Perpetual Timepiece. Now, Perpetual Time, I'm saying I decided to go with it. I'm not doing some groundbreaking thing. Aside from Samwise Gamgee, most of these cards are very common. Like EDH, CDEH, whatever. That has all these cards. Perpetual Timepiece is pretty cool because, sometimes you get disrupted, sometimes one of your opponents holds out on a disruption until, you mill your entire library, and at that point, they just pass the turn, draw step, you can't draw, you lose the game. So Perpetual Timepiece is a very useful tool to make sure you have at least one oh no button. Other combos I really like is the Rosy Cotton of South Lane and Basking Brute Scale. This is a very, very common combo, but essentially When you create a token, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Is the ability of Rosy Cotton. Don't just ignore the food token she creates. Like when she enters, she creates a food token, and then because she created a token, she gives +1/+1 to something. Basking Broodscale. Whenever one or more +1/+1 counters are put on Basking Broodscale, you may create a 0/1 colorless Eldrazi spawn creature token, which sacrifices creature, add 1 mana, add a colorless mana. So very straightforward. You can just play Broodscale, play Rosy Cotton targeting Broodscale summons something, Rosy Cotton activates, Rosy Cotton Broodscale, infinite Eldrazi creatures, infinite mana, a lot of infinites. Now, the main goal of Tayam isn't to go infinite and be as degenerate as possible. However, you can absolutely do that. Tayam does let you do some absolutely toxic things. That's why I have a secondary, less powerful deck, which I just play more than Tayam. But, Tayam has a very special place in my heart. Despite the combos I've shown you and the way I talked about the card, you can also use it as a toolbox deck and use Tayam as a combo piece, right? Like, not as a combo piece, but as a answer to all your life's problems. just search whatever you need, search money. And, you can use this for lower power games. So Tayam will, of course, need protection, right? Like, this is not a controversial statement. Tayam will need the protection on the, infinite combos as well. However, I think if you're playing Tayam like this as an advantage engine, then you really want to protect it. So Lightning Greaves and Swift Boots, they are excellent cards, right? They're extremely good cards. However, they're very good here because you can, they're easier to find because you can just mill them and you don't have to break bank getting like some of the more expensive tutor cards. I like them both. They're both equally good. Personally, I like Lightning Greaves because the Shroud keyword is less countered by cards that say, oh, ignore hexproof or whatever. So like turn off hexproof or whatever. So that's why I like Shroud. So reoccurring removal, I have this in my deck too. Accursed Marauder, it's a really good card. People in Standard play it. When Accursed Marauder enters the battlefield, each player sacrifices a non-token creature. So what you can do is, say you generated a little bit of advantage, you play Accursed Marauder, Marauder comes in, your opponents all have to sacrifice something, you sacrifice Marauder, of course. Then you use Tayam to bring back Marauder. So this way you can get away with not having to deal with your opponent's problematic monsters because you're not targeting them, you're not killing them, your opponent is sacrificing them, which is a very useful way to get around protections they might have. Now, there's one more card I want to talk about called Bulwark Ox. This is a card from Foundations, or not Foundations, sorry, Aether Drift. It's the Mario Kart set. Now, I'll read its abilities. It's a white, 1 generic, 1 white cost card. It is a mount for 2/2. Whenever this creature attacks while saddled, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. Sacrifice this creature. Creatures you control with counters on them gain hexproof and indestructible until the end of the turn. The saddle cost is 1. So for those of you who don't know, because mostly Tacticus videos and whatnot, tap any number of other creatures you control with total power 1 or more. This mount becomes saddled until the end of the turn. The reason I like this card is because you can sacrifice this thing and give everything you control hexproof and indestructible. Remember, there is a card from Bloomburrow where you gift your opponent a card and everything gets hexproof and indestructible. However, that's an instant. And the reason I prefer this in the Tayam deck is because the fact that this is a creature and a permanent, you can reoccur this often, right? Like giving your entire board, or rather giving all your creatures hexproof and indestructible is absolutely bonkers. Remember, every creature enters with a vigilance counter. So like you can very easily consistently play, I don't want to say every turn, but a good chunk of your turns where your opponents can't really interact with the board you're using. There are other cards you can use There are stronger versions. There are even more degenerate versions of Tayam. There are significantly less degenerate versions of Tayam. It's just, he's my favorite thing in the game to play. He feels like, he doesn't feel like a commander. He just feels like something that exists to make other things shine, and I like that. You know, he isn't some Xyrus-esque commander. I also have a Xyrus deck. It's like my second favorite commander. I'm such a basic guy, I know, I'm sorry. But like with Xyrus, he's very much the star of the show, and he's like, yeah, let me just beat you to death with, you know, snakes and card draw and be extremely fun. Whereas this guy is, you know, he doesn't really do anything himself. He's like, oh, let me just put together different cards and let me create something that's greater than the sum of its parts. And I really appreciate that. So that's why I wanted to share this. You know, this video is gonna get like 200 views, but that's fine. You know, I just want to talk about it. I like this. I like Tayam. It's a cool card, and you know, that's it. Thank you very much for watching. You know, I'm gonna just slowly skedaddle out of here because there's like 2 of you left watching here now. Have a good day and stay safe.